So, hi and welcome to this first Sony webinar, and it's about planning and production, especially for the sort of the corporate and events. What do you expect and how to best deal with it? With me, I've got Ollie Da Costa and Rupert Bryan, who'll say a few words about themselves first. Rupert, apart from you getting married, give us a bit more information.
So I run a company called Motion Picture House, mphfilm.com, and we specialise in making branded content. And I also am the owner of a company called Crow TV, based in Shepherd's Bush.
And Ollie, what do you do?
I run a company called Fractive, which is a sort of two-part company. We do production and filming services and more traditional post-production services.
Marvellous. So now we know who the people are. A bit about housekeeping. So this web's going to last for about 30 minutes. Then we'll have a question and answers. There's a couple of poll questions as well. And if you want to join the conversation, it's on hashtag Sony Video Production. Just to let you know, this whole webinar is being filmed on two X70s and two Z150s. So let's get down to it. Rupert, why do you do this? Why are you into this business?
I ask myself the same question on a daily basis. Why? Just because I love it. I think you have to love it. I think this is a business that you can't just go in half-heartedly. You've got to give it everything you possibly can. I think my character tends to lend itself to being very enthusiastic, and I really enjoy it. I think that's the primary reason is I really enjoy the business.
And that's why you just got married?
Yes, so all that stops now. No.
And Ollie, obviously, you know, why do this? Obviously, you spend evenings, days away from home and so on. Why do you do it?
I think it comes down to passion. It comes down to loving what you're doing. For me, I love learning things as well. I love learning sort of new software techniques, new camera techniques, playing around with the absolute multitude of production tools that there are nowadays, and seeing what you can do with them and how creative you can be with them. And it's sort of turning your ideas into reality.
So, okay, let's start from the beginning. You've got your clients. You need to understand the brief, and obviously you also got to convey your ideas to them. How does it work from your side? Because obviously you've got the high-end sort of commercial ones. Give us a sort of an idea how that works with your clients.
Well, it kind of starts with us with a script to a certain extent. There's always going to be there's a story of some description. It could be 30 seconds, it could be a couple of minutes, it could be 30 minutes, but actually it's in the form of a treatment as well. So actually we all know what we're planning to shoot and film. So it's quite simple. It's laid out for us. It's storyboarded, it's planned, it's thought about. You know, we ask ourselves the first couple of questions before we even go anywhere near equipment is, what's this film planned to do? What are we trying to achieve? The feeling, the emotion, what's the call to action? Really understanding what the objective is of that bit of content before we go anywhere near production.
With you, Ollie, obviously you do quite a lot of events and sort of action sports. Is there time to do a pre-production or not, or does it vary from?
We tend to shoot in locations that we've been to before, so as long as we know where the location is, we don't necessarily need to do that much kind of recce type work. We will always do pre-production. You have to. You can't avoid doing pre-production nowadays, and that can be anywhere from a day to 2 weeks, 3 weeks kind of thing. If it is a location that we're going to for the first time, we'll try and learn as much about the location and about the format of the events and that kind of thing beforehand, just because being forearmed is being forewarned, about all of that kind of thing.
And how important is a brief, but to have one beforehand? Because I know I've gone out on a shoot, and basically the brief is go and shoot it, get good vox pops, and give us a really wonderful highlights at the very end, and that's all I get. Obviously, you deal with that. Would you go with that, or?
Everything is much more pre-planned. In terms of the film, the final film should be very clear in everyone's mind, everyone involved. That's from an agency perspective, but from creative directors, producers, all elements and all people involved in the production must understand what type of film we're going to create. So there'll be various reference films. So it's very clear right from the start.
Right, we've got sorry to interrupt there. We have a poll for everybody. To all you out there, do you work in corporate or event video production? It's a simple yes or no. Please let us know, and I'll find out what the result is in a moment. In the meantime, as far as the capturing of the event and the ingest, there are some pitfalls. which you've come across in terms of frame rates and so on. Give us a bit of a...
Yeah, I think one of the major ones is, as you said, is the frame rate. If we're shooting overseas, if it's a PAL country, we can normally say, okay, well, yeah, we'll all be shooting PAL. It does depend on what your deliverable is. If your deliverable is web, then you can pretty much get away with mixing and matching formats to a certain extent. If you're shooting for a client who maybe wants a web deliverable but then wants a broadcast deliverable on top of that, you do have to put a lot more consideration into it. So whether that's matching all the cameras to PAL or matching them all to 2997, we've come across that in the past where we've had, some people 2997, some people 23, some people 25, and the fact that some of the cameras can also do the 50s and the 60s and that kind of thing then can also introduce even more problems. So we do try and put in as much effort at the start to try and standardise to one format or the other. Then at least if we go to the next stage with broadcast, we know that everything is in a constant format.
Marvellous. Now, clients obviously all ask for different things depending on what type of video it is, whether it's an event, whether it's a corporate video, whether it's a brand which you're trying to promote. You've had some wonderful experiences on the Royal Caribbean, if I'm not wrong. Why that was suddenly totally different to what you normally expect?
Yeah, that was a bit more last minute in terms of the organisation behind it. The big ship was the biggest ship in the world was being launched, and what we had to do is go and film actually inside the ship. So we sent a free runner to go and roam all the different locations inside it, and we filmed him over a course of 2 days. The ship came into Southampton. We had to get aboard, set up an edit suite on the fly, and actually shoot all sorts of different formats and all sorts of different environments inside, outside, different types of formats. And we had to produce the video within 2 or 3 days. We had to shoot for 2 days and turn it around within a day on board, because then the film was being launched to the PR to say, look, the ship has arrived. So we had to put out the film within about 3.5 days.
And I suppose that's the same. Sometimes you have those, for example, I gather you do some stuff for Red Bull again. That means going out. But in your case, do you actually know what you're going to be shooting and what are the sort of pitfalls?
You will generally have an idea of the format of the event. But yeah, I mean, it would tend to be you get a list of the order that the riders are taking part at the event. You then have certain times that are scheduled for the prize giving and that kind of thing. But you are pretty much left to your own devices for the rest of for the shooting the actual event. We've put teams together in the past, and then sort of we've done a location recce and then said, cameraman A can get these 2 shots at this location. Cameraman B can then turn around. Cameraman A can then turn around and get C and D locations. So you do kind of try to use your resources as best you can for that kind of thing.
Now, going back to the poll, 80% of you do work in corporate and events. Just a little sort of break. We're just going to see Ollie's show reel, which shows all the bits and pieces he does. So hopefully you enjoyed Ollie's wonderful show reel. We're going to the sort of next part of the topic, which includes, setting up in any situation, which obviously we know that you go from extreme sports, you just done a Royal Caribbean. There are lots of variety of kit out there which you can hire, which you can use, going from action cameras to robotic cameras to small handy cameras like this NXR camera, which we've got over here. What do you choose and when do you choose it? How does it work?
Well, sometimes Well, often the DP will have a weapon of choice, whatever he wants or she wants to use. We can make suggestions, but ultimately they'll have a favourite camera which they feel really comfortable using and will enable them to do the best job. So very much the crew will dictate. I mean, it is budget dependent as well. Obviously, depending on what sort of overall budget you have, then there's no point suggesting sort of the bigger guns in essence. And there's lots of cameras that do, the technology now allows you to do fantastic 4K shooting on smaller budgets. So I think, having a vision of what you want that film to look like is achievable, even on a smaller budget. So the right kit will be dictated by the job.
Yeah. And, I know that I've gone out on a shoot, especially if you go abroad, and nowadays that the cameras have become so small, you can easily take one of those abroad in your hand luggage as opposed to trying to put masses of kit in your hold, and that's going to cost you a fortune. So that's actually quite useful. And there's multicam situations as well. I don't know if you've used multicam in your productions at all, and what do you use then?
You've used multicam?
I have used it a little bit, but mostly for events that are edited after the event. So we haven't done any live multicam specifically. But
there's a music show that we've been working on called Love Music, which is about 6 cameras, and that's definitely multicam. So we've used quite a bit of Sony kit on that.
Yeah, because obviously, Sony do them. Lots of companies do them. Sony's just brought a little switcher out, which obviously would come in useful, together with a little remote unit, which actually works quite well with these cameras as well as with the FS5, which means you can control everything that the camera has from this little remote, like virtually a one-man band. I can imagine if your budgets are cut, would that be a useful thing for you? Or?
Yeah, I think it is. I think as we sort of take, one of the shows is going to become probably more online, so the budgets will be reflective of that. So actually we still want to have a 6-camera setup, and if it means we can only afford 2 or 3 cameramen, it means that we can still have 6 cameras, but those wides and lock-off shots that can still be controlled remotely means that we can get the same end result, but on tighter budgets. So yeah, it's something that I think we'd definitely look to deploy.
Now, obviously, as we said, there's lots of kit around. Hiring kit. When do you hire kit, and when? Obviously, you've got a certain amount of your own kit, but you obviously have to hire a kit. Who decides on that, and when do you hire and what? Obviously, in your sports arena, you go through quite a large number of different types of kit. What are they?
We do. Most of the operators who we work with tend to have their own kit, but we will use certain guys who we know who are versatile across a whole range of different cameras. So those guys will go to their preferred hire companies to pick up whatever they feel for the job. Personally, I'm using an FS700 still. I think it's a fantastic camera. It's great for action sports. The slow-mo capability and the low light and all those sorts of things, and the upgrade path to 4K with it. It's a fantastic unit. But we integrate FS5, FS7, X70, quite a few different cameras in there, and we also use action cams quite a lot. And having the ability to have some of those action cams with 4K on them, we've built tiny little rigs that we can sort of use the action cam with, so that it can be an interview camera for an operator who's maybe got a bit more of a rapport with a certain athlete, or needs to be less intrusive, less smaller footprint in terms of being around and mobile on a hillside, and the ability to then kind of stick wireless microphones into that as well. It's a really great little tool.
You've used action cams as well as A7Ss for.
Yes, yeah. There's a picture of an action cam we've got on a Caterham, a follow car at Silverstone that we're at. Great camera, perfect. It had to be kind of tightly, securely rigged to the camera, so small enough whereby it can get in and out of situations. And actually, if it get crunches and falls off and gets smashed, then it's not going to cause us too much painful damage financially. We use the A7S quite a lot because it's great in low light, kind of one of the reasons, but also just its size. It fits really well on the Ronin. It's lightweight, and the 4K, the results of it, it's just been perfect for the type of work that we do.
Talking about the old days, because I know you're not that old and you just got married, but
grey hair. Yeah.
Grey hair.
Let's get over it.
In the old days, you had the like the old digibeaters. It could only do one thing. Film. Nowadays, the technology has improved so much that there's so much you can do with these smaller cameras. Have you found that an asset or a hindrance, or does it help productions, or?
It just helps you get the shot, I think, doesn't it?
It does.
It doesn't matter what the shot is that you're looking to try and get. It's solely allowed that everything is achievable from sports and adventure from your side. It's just probably changed the game.
Yeah.
Quite considerably.
I think certainly when you're I mean, I do corporate films as well, but when you're in the corporate world, you tend to, be in a situation where you're going to use one camera, and might be an interchangeable lens camera, it might be a fixed lens camera like the NX5R, but to have cameras that have that versatility to allow you to be able to do action, sport, corporate, drama, news, reportage, whatever it might be, and it can be a single camera, and have the facilities like the MI shoe that you have on a lot of the new Sony cameras, so that you don't even have to have cables. You can just plug in your receiver, as long as you remember to take your transmitter as well with you. But you can do that kind of thing very, very easily, and it just makes production so versatile nowadays.
Now, you mentioned sound. Sound is obviously quite important, and again, as a raft of various sound kit, Sony doing from the twin transmitter, which you can put two mics on, with the wonderful hot shoe, which goes on top of the camera, which means you don't have any extra cables. How important is sound in the production? Is it something that you just say, oh, it'll be all right, or is it very important?
It's proven to get us out in a lot of trouble, actually. Just recording reference out, i.e. making sure you just turn the channels. Most cameras, most of the range now, have an internal mic, so you can at least capture reference sound. It's helped us out when we've made feature films, long form content where you've got a lot of rushes. There's a bit of software we use called Pluralize, which allows you to match up the actual recorded sound with the reference sound. So it looks at the waveforms, marries it up, and takes out days of painful hand-eye matching. So it's reference sound, also from from capturing the actual sound itself. If there's certain animals or certain cars make a certain sound, which is very hard to get from sound libraries, just having that sound on just pays huge dividends when it comes down to post-production.
We mentioned sort of hiring kit abroad, but when do you decide to hire kit abroad? And when do you decide to take it with you? And what would you actually go and hire abroad? What's the most important ones which you can't really take over with you?
For me, it would tend to be kind of grip equipment, big heavy items, sort of tripods, camera heads, that kind of thing. Those are the items that we would tend to hire abroad, just because there's just no point in paying for shipping for taking those across the other side of the world. Yeah.
With you and the big budget films, you have is the client always with you, and do you bring, how much extra staff do you bring? Because there's two different extremes here. Ollie's going there with maybe a crew of 2 or 3, maybe 4. You all of a sudden you have a crew of 10, 15. The client's there. How do you organise all that beforehand so that the client knows what's going to happen and so on? How important are schedules and?
Well, communication is kind of the vital part. I mean, if we travel, this is abroad, we're taking our core team, so production managers, DPs, kind of the art directors, those crew, and from an agency perspective, the creative directors and key producers. So there's a core team that will always come to wherever we're filming, because they're part of that decision process, which needs to be made on set, for example. So how's everything communicated? It's just, as I said, everything's storyboarded, everything's produced in terms of plan. We know that we've got shot listings, storyboards, all those things which we communicate towards everyone who's coming with us, that know exactly what we're shooting, how we're shooting, down to things like frame rates as well. Every shot, if there's a shot that needs 1,000 frames per second, for example, that's designated at a certain time. That shot must be sort of put into the storyboard at that time. So it's just key communication, I think, is the part that we need to be really good at.
Just a quick mention. If you could have any questions for the Q&A, please do them now so that we can ask the wonderful two gentlemen later on in the day. Okay, going on to still sticking with the client. You filmed everything; it's in the can. What happens next, as far as the client is concerned? Obviously, I'll start with Ollie, because obviously with your ones, it's basically here's the event, shoot it, and give me an end product. But is there a sort of in between, just after you've done the filming, what happens then?
It sometimes comes from the briefing stage, and it's sometimes sort of like a post-event debrief. So it might be that we've got a very loose framework at the start of it, that we will always try and put as much pre-production time into it to kind of create a structure, and for events that maybe haven't gone exactly how they should have gone in terms of the planning, not from our side, from the weather, or riders not turning up, or people not taking part, or whatever it might be. You do have to be very agile with that after the event, and the closer the turnaround for the deliverable as well, that has a huge impact on it as well. So yeah, we will try and sort of give a sort of a potted history of what we were able to get, what we couldn't get, and how we feel that's going to work towards the finished product at the end of it.
And as far as you're concerned, Rupert?
Again, everything is just planned well in advance. So yeah, there's everything is scheduled, everything is storyboard, everything is planned before we turn up. So in terms of those people who are involved, there's a lot of people with a vested interest in that film. So if we work for an agency or a PR company, obviously us as the production company have the brand themselves. So you probably have 20 to 30 people, sometimes even more, on a campaign, on a film, that will have an idea of how that should look and feel. They entrust the director to a certain extent and the producing team to make sure that film is what was originally wanted to be created, but the director ultimately is his responsibility or her responsibility to deliver it what they think is the best. So
how many times do you allow the client to interfere?
Well, they will interfere. That's part of it. Not interfere. They will comment and come back. But we will try to do first off is give them the film they want, so they don't have to come back with too many changes and concerns. But that's part of the process, and I think you have to understand, if you want to be paid commercially to make films or branded content, it's their film. You're making it for them, so give them what they want.
You are doing something for Love Music. With Multicam, just tell us a bit about that at the moment.
Well, that's the music show, whereby it's kind of stripped down from being sort of a big broadcast show with sort of big shiny floor to a much more spit and sawdust kind of in a small live venue environment. So the Multicam, it's a small environment, it's much more contained, more manageable, sort of fixed camera rigs as well.
So you could use robotic cameras in there?
Yeah. So using, that would be ideal for certain, overheads or sort of big wides or sort of, mid shots, whereby you're not going to be dependent upon much camera movement. That would be ideal.
So there's that take up some of the budget. How much, robotic cameras, is that a way of scaling down the budget, or? That's ultimately the goal behind it. So reducing manpower, which is expense, which isn't ideal, but I think it's just the world that we're living in terms of content creation. People want content; they want a lot of it, and actually, if you can offer live music coverage in an affordable way, then so be it. And using technology to help us still deliver the same end product, and I think if you approach it from the right start with good planning, I think you can still get it. No, I'm just talking. I know that we've just done an event, and we'll be going to an event doing for Google, which is like one of yours, where we go out, film what happens throughout a few days, vox pops and so on, and then literally edit throughout the night and have something ready for the last day. And in that case, we have to get the client to be there at certain points throughout the edit, so that they can't just come in at the very end and go, oh, that's wrong. Obviously, we know the client very well, like you do, so we know what they want. But that is quite nerve-wracking by the time you get to the end, hoping, okay, is this going to be all right? But it always works. But obviously, there is no, you can't do any changes, which are long form. Yes. So obviously, that's a difficult one, but it's always can be done. Yeah. You mentioned audio was very important. Have you had any real hiccups with audio or with frame rates or with anything else throughout your experience doing productions?
When people don't record audio, that's the bit
that's
tends to not help.
Yeah, or when people record the same volume level on both channels of a camera, and meaning that both channels are blown. So nothing's recoverable.
Yeah, that's bad.
It's almost worse because it teases you that it's there, but you can't use it.
There is the world of ADR, we understand that, but it's painful, it's time consuming, it's costly. All those things, a little tip that we have is a field recorder, which we tend to take out with us. If something happened to the sound man or sound, it normally tends to be some sound issues, interference, which you can't control in certain environments. But if you're doing an interview with someone and you're not going to get that interview again with that person, if it's a celebrity or someone high pro, you've got to make sure you've got that audio. You can't recreate it. So, just very simply, some interviews we've been, a little field recorder which we take out with us, and great sound. You hold it quite close if you're doing a vox pop or an interview, and it's just great. You've got it. So, that's something put in your tool bag.
You mentioned filming celebrities and so on. Insurance. I don't know. Do you take out insurance for your films, and when do you do that? Obviously, if you're doing a quick interview with someone in the street, probably not, but obviously on your bigger budgets you do, and probably, I don't know whether on your action sports, do you do that at all?
Yeah, I mean, we have to have sort of full public liability insurance and all of that kind of thing.
No, I meant the insurance to cover the tape, well, it's not called the tape stop, but cover the weather and so on, the rushes and so on.
Yeah. No, we wouldn't tend to. Some of that will be covered by our regular insurance anyway, but yeah.
It's done by sort of level of value of production. I think if we have a certain amount of productions that go over an amount, there's a threshold. So if suddenly you have a £10,000 shoot or £1 million shoot, you're going to have to pay an excess and have it revalued if it's a big or circumstance. A bit like when we shot the Free Runner, that's exceptional circumstances. You've got someone who's throwing themselves around a ship. You've got to make sure he is insured, and there's a waiver signed. But it's it is the part that can be forgotten in terms of insurance, and actually. With pre-planning, it doesn't have to be that expensive either. So that is a vital part of the production process.
No, I think you'll find, as you say, that type of insurance is important. Your public liability is important, and it also varies. I know that we were filming for TFL, and suddenly they said we need a public liability insurance of 10 million, and you were set up. So it's always worthwhile checking with the larger corporates what insurance is needed, because you might not be allowed on and so on. So that's actually quite important. 4K or not to 4K or HD?
Yeah.
I know sometimes you have, when 4K is becoming very popular now, when do you use 4K? Obviously quite a few of the Sony cameras now, the Z150s and so on, and the FS5 all do 4K. When do you use it? Is it worthwhile using it, or do you stick with HD at the moment?
I think 4K has a huge number of advantages from the action sports world. One of the big ones for us is that certainly if you're not doing something live, you're doing something that you're going to edit and retouch later. You can find that you're in a situation where an athlete is going to do a trick or a stunt or something like that. They might have 15 different options that they might do for that particular obstacle, and you might be having to look at 3 different obstacles and reframing between them. With 4K, you can be a little bit lazier, especially if you're shooting maybe 30 or 40 people in a day, and you can generally point in the direction that they are going to be, knowing that you can pan and scan and zoom into that shot without any loss of resolution, without any loss of quality, and you can actually use it for creative purposes as well. So we've previously found ourselves in situations where we've shot interviews in 4K and then taken 2 HD crops out of those interviews to fake having a 2-camera setup.
So okay, we're coming to the end of the webinar. We've got quite a few Q&As, but I just need one good tip from you for production purposes. I know what my tip would be. One, if you're hiring kit, always check the kit before you go out on a shoot. I know that in one point we thought was perfect, but they didn't supply the base plate. And the other one is, if you are shooting abroad, make sure that you get the numbers of the local hire companies, just in case your kit goes down or it gets stopped at customs. Rupert, wonderful tip from you.
The big tip. I would say make it emotional. Find the story in whatever you're shooting. I think no matter if if it's a wedding videographer or it's obviously a film, just making sure it's very clear. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. And if you're not, if you don't have a story, go and film someone's birthday. There's a beginning, a middle, end, or a wedding. It doesn't matter. But like, find that emotion, stay true to it. In terms of if you're a filmmaker or a film, you will have a vision of what that film is going to look and feel like by the end of it. So stick to it and make it emotional.
And Ollie, a wonderful tip for you.
Mine would be really to make sure that you match your cameras. It doesn't matter whether you're on a very short turnaround or a longer turnaround. If you have to do a lot of post-production work to match cameras and balance different things and go from S-Log to Rec 709 and various different things like that, that's a lot more work for your editor, for your post house to have to deal with. If you can match all your cameras at the start, even if they're not exactly matched, they don't have to be, but we've done it before where we've sat down all of our cameras in a line and put them all in exactly the same settings. It takes a huge headache away from the post-production people later down the line, which is usually me. So.
Blame yourself.
Yeah.
Marvellous. Well, thank you very much. Just to let everybody know, there's a survey at the end. If you could all please fill it in with various feedbacks, whether you like their shirts, whether you think Rupert's wedding was worthwhile, even if you didn't turn up. But in the meantime, here we go. Here's some questions. One from Stephen Hill. What about lighting for corporate?
Have it. It's important.
The answer is obviously have it.
It's important. Light is key. My goodness. It's imperative. This technology does help. Like the A7S is great in low light, and there's certain cameras which just allow you to go in and shoot and make it happen. But a good light technology is fantastic. All the light panels that now exist, sort of small, nimble, battery operated, that allow you always to have light. I would say
you have one integrated in the NX5R as well.
There it is, and there's light built in. So it's a simple panel light is one sort of no matter what the shoot we're doing. If we're going to do vox pops or anything, we always take a portable panel light with us, charged. Check your batteries. Take two, because then that just helps you out. As long as your subject matter is lit, everything else doesn't matter. As long as that subject matter is lit, and you can see clearly what they're saying, then you're halfway there.
Yeah.
One for you from Brian. Are there any special pre-production considerations for one-man jobs or one-man bands?
Check again with all of your equipment. There's nothing worse than going out and finding that you've taken two receivers rather than a transmitter and a receiver when you're going off to do an interview. Make sure all your batteries are checked, your panel lights, and just give yourself those insurance bits of equipment that if you do find yourself in a situation where you think, oh, I wish I had my so-and-so with me.
Reflector.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I think it's also what Rupert mentioned to me before. Rupert, you think of your shoot day the day before you go through.
Yeah. No, I have this thing where I try and just pretend it's happening the day before, and also it's a weird thing, but I try not to shoot on a Monday just because then it gives us the Monday for any other last-minute kit decisions or camera testing, not on a weekend day. So, I think. Kit list is, I know it sounds very simple, but actually having a checklist of all those kit, you suddenly just, a quick skim will suddenly just remind you can't remember everything, you can't think of everything, but actually just that list to go, and like reflector, for example, it's helped us out so many times, just having that in the back of the car or having that on set. So
here's another question, Adam from Film Fire Productions. There's a little, plug for Adam. How do you deal with clients who want a project for a low fee relative to everyone's own rates? Do you reject the project or do you try and find a middle point? Now I can quickly answer that one. I know this will always happen to you, and it's, from my point of view, you have to base it on a sort of a gut feeling. Either you say, fine, I can do it for that, but that is a special price this once off, and if you do a good job they should come back to you, or you say no. But I've had clients who have done that, and they've now been very good clients for ages at normal prices. So it's up to you to decide. I don't know what Ollie?
I think it is. It's very much on a per project basis. I've been in the same situation where you accept doing a smaller scale piece of work, knowing or hoping that it's going to turn into a larger project, and I'd say probably 50% of the time it does, 50% of the time it doesn't. Going back to what I said at the start, what I try and take away from that is the learning experience, and if there's something to be gained from my personal development as an editor or as a cameraman or whatever. So,
but if you feel it's like it's someone trying to just take you for granted, then
yeah, if you can afford to take the risk on it or to do it, then do it. I mean, ultimately, I think you're in control of your own time, and if it's something that you think, like Ollie says, if you're going to get benefit from it, maybe it's something different or a different type of film, you may get something out of it as a showreel piece that you think is a great shot to have. We've done it with a few clients, and some clients, exactly like you say, come back and keep feeding us with work. I think it's up to you. Every circumstance is different, I think.
Last question looks like it, although there's quite a few others. They'll probably all be answered afterwards anyway for you. What do you use for backing up and storing all your footage? Well, that is a very important question. I'm terrified since it's data. In the old days you had tapes, now it's data. When we film, it's on your cards. It then gets backed up by a DIT or yourselves, if you're a one-man band, onto either your laptop. Then from the laptop we then put it on external hard disks. When we get back, we put it onto a server. And then on the server gets backed up every evening, and then we also got a server which is in a different place. So I've gone probably over the top, but some companies will say that's not over the top. I don't know. What do you do?
Well, there's a 3 backup rule, isn't it? Just make sure it's backed up 3 times, no matter where it is, in different locations. So we back up onto LTO ultimately, take it back to the office, put it on the server, everything gets LTO'd and backed up, which I think is a smart way of doing it. But storage is pretty reasonable now, so there's no excuse not to have it backed up at least 3 times, I would have said.
But after a shoot, these small hard disks, which you can get 1 terabyte ones, it's worthwhile doing a double backup. So once you're sure they're on both of those hard disks, then you can format your cards. Because don't forget, once you format a card in camera, it's virtually nigh on impossible to get the footage back.
Yeah.
Ollie?
My tip for that is using SSDs as the media that you back up to. We've had in the past spinning drives that have been dropped, damaged, whatever, and SSDs are a lot more robust. They're a huge amount faster. They maybe don't have quite the capacity of the spinning discs at the moment, but the price point's coming down all the time, and you can get portable, little RAID ones where you can chuck a couple of them in together to get halfway decent capacity and even faster speed. But yeah, I will tend to take probably 4 or 5 SSDs away with me, and I also tend to use relatively small SD cards as well, because the worst thing is if you fill up an SD card or a micro SD card with a lot of footage over a couple of days, you then find that if you lose that, you've lost everything.
Right. Well, I'm afraid we have to finish off there. If you could, if you enjoy this, could you please sign up for the next one, which is coming up in half an hour. It's all about post-production. So if you could, 1, fill in the survey, and 2, if you can register for the second webinar, we'll all be ready and waiting for you to carry on with post-production. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.